I witnessed my wife being placed in handcuffs right on our own land, by police officers who took the word of a total stranger over the legal deed we held. I was utterly powerless, like a newborn, as I saw Diana's hands secured behind her with a zip tie. All the while, this woman, an absolute blight named Lorraine, recorded the entire event on her phone as if she were chronicling a great victory. The sharp sound of the cuffs locking is still seared into my memory. My wife's bewildered tears, mingled with my own paralyzing anger, as our neighbors watched from their porches as if we were some sort of matinee spectacle. Lorraine just stood there, a triumphant smirk on her face, waving a document that looked like an official HOA violation notice but was ultimately as fraudulent as her self-proclaimed power. Our own legal papers, the very ones confirming our ownership of this land, were scattered by the morning breeze across our driveway like confetti at the most miserable party imaginable. What would you do if the police were convinced by someone else that you were a trespasser on your own property? Post your most insane HOA horror story below, and let me know where you are watching from, because this lake war is on the verge of escalating. My name is Marcus, and at 52 years old, I believed I had finally earned a little damn peace. I put in 30 years as an electrician, navigating cramped attics and resolving other people's crises while my back constantly protested. My wife, Diana, is 48 and is a virtuoso with figures. For 15 years, we had been setting aside every single spare dollar to purchase our own piece of heaven. Whispering Pines Lake is located 2 hours north of the city, in a place where the air is scented with pine, not the city's fumes of exhaust and disappointment. We discovered an ideal 1-2-acre property featuring a classic 1970s cabin that required some attention but was structurally sound. It was the kind of location where the calls of loons echo over the water in the morning, instead of sirens piercing through your nightmares. Our realtor, who was as sweet as could be, noted that a few neighbors were particular. I should have pressed her for a definition of particular, as it apparently translates to completely deranged. During our second week of ownership, while I was busy stacking firewood, a voice shattered my tranquility like a power saw. "Excuse me? Are you the new owners?" I pivoted to see a woman holding a clipboard as if it were a sacred text. A measuring tape was slung around her neck, worn like a suburbanite's Medal of Honor, and she had a smile that clearly communicated, "I'm here to wreck your day. I'm Lorraine Kessler, Community Standards Coordinator for the Whispering Pines Lake Homeowners Association." The aroma of freshly cut sawdust filled the morning air, blending with the crisp smell of the lake and another scent, something pungent and chemical that made my nose itch. I would later identify it as Lorraine's trademark perfume. "Oh, to crazy lady." She began reciting a litany of offenses as if she were a prosecutor in a major trial. Incorrect gate color, a boat dock that breached setback rules, firewood stacking that disturbed the visual harmony, and my absolute favorite, our mailbox was guilty of aggressive nonconformance. That will be $350 in immediate compliance fees, in addition to $75 in monthly dues. Diana came out onto the porch, a dish towel in her hand, with an expression that suggested she was trying to comprehend what new form of torment had just appeared on our doorstep. "I'm sorry," she said, "but our closing documents made no mention of an HOA." Lorraine's smile became venomous. "Honey, there's a great deal you city folks fail to grasp about upholding proper community standards. We're here to protect property values." The way she venomously uttered "city folks" made me clench my jaw. Diana was raised in a farming community of 800 people, which is a far cry from downtown Chicago. 2 days later, the witch came back, and this time she had backup. Meet Tyler, her 30-something compliance officer, who gave the impression he'd never handled a tool more sophisticated than a smartphone. Yet he wore an official-looking badge as if he were with the FBI. Tyler began photographing our property with the focus of a crime scene analyst. Click, click, click. He captured every angle of our dock, our non-compliant gate, and even the audacious way we had parked our truck on our own land. They tucked a professional-looking final notice beneath our windshield wiper, complete with a formal letterhead and legally phrased threats, demanding the gate be repainted by Friday or we would face escalating enforcement action. Now here's the deal. I may be just an electrician, but 3 decades of working with contractors has trained me to detect a scam from 3 counties away. That evening, I went for a stroll. 6 other homes had identical notices attached to them, fluttering like small white flags of defeat. Diana started up her laptop that night, and whenever my wife gets that specific determined look, it means someone is about to experience a very bad day. County records indicate no registered HOA, she declared, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. I phoned Betty, the woman who sold us the place. Oh, sweetie, she sighed. Lorraine has been tormenting people. For 3 years, most residents just pay her off to get her to leave them alone. Diana was already 10 steps ahead, accessing state business registration files. Marcus, check this out. She filed paperwork for an LLC but never officially registered it as a legitimate HOA. This woman is operating a pure and simple extortion racket. The mineral taste of our well water felt more pronounced that night, but there was another flavor beneath it. The taste of a battle we were undoubtedly going to win. Diana isn't the kind to simply give up. The following morning, she drove into town and came back with a military-grade electronic keypad lock for our gate, the type you see on the back doors of banks. If this lunatic wants to play games, Diana declared as she drilled holes for security cameras, we're going to record every single unhinged thing she does. She erected private property signs every 50 feet as if she were claiming territory, each one laminated and legally sound. Next came the evidence log, a spiral-bound notebook. That would serve as a testament to human folly, enough to make a prosecutor shed tears of joy. The smell of new ink blended with our morning coffee as Diana meticulously recorded everything with the accuracy of a forensic accountant, which, incidentally, is what she used to be before transitioning to part-time bookkeeping. Lorraine was oblivious to the fact that she had just started a feud with a person who could track a single penny through an international money laundering operation. 3 days later, Lorraine appeared with actual bolt cutters. I was inside, replacing a faulty light fixture, when Diana's voice pierced the morning calm. Ma'am, you need to step away from our property this instant, or I will be contacting the police. I looked out the window and saw Lorraine physically trying to sever our new lock while Tyler filmed the entire scene, as if they were creating a criminal activity for dummies. Instructional video. This gate is obstructing emergency vehicle access, Lorraine proclaimed to Diana's camera, with the assurance of someone who had clearly lost all connection to reality. The Homeowners Association holds easement rights. Diana didn't even flinch. Then show me the officially recorded easement document. Lorraine produced her briefcase filled with fraudulent emergency access bylaws, concocted community covenants, and forged signatures on documents that might look official if you squinted hard after a recent head trauma. This woman had dedicated more creativity to her fraudulent scheme than most people apply to their real jobs. But this is the point where Lorraine's amateur theatrics collided with reality TV. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's patrol vehicle came up our driveway. Deputy Craig stepped out, looking as though he would prefer to be wrestling alligators than mediating a neighborhood dispute. Ma'am, he said to Diana, while Lorraine was practically quivering with excitement. I've received a report that you have illegally altered community property and are obstructing lawful emergency access. The sound of Deputy Craig's boots on the gravel was like a funeral dirge as Diana calmly pulled our deed, title insurance, property survey, and tax records from our truck. Meanwhile, Lorraine was frantically rummaging through her folder of fabrications, pulling out what she referred to as the HOA master deed, a document that supposedly gave her association mystical authority over everyone's land. Officer, this woman is obviously a squatter who has jeopardized the community's safety infrastructure, Lorraine stated with the righteous indignation of someone who genuinely believed her own fabrications. It was at that moment I nearly jeopardized our whole position by striding towards Lorraine, prepared to acquaint her face with some hard truths. Diana's hand grabbed my arm with unexpected force. Marcus, document, don't react. Her voice was steady, but I could feel a slight tremor in her fingers. My smart wife saved us from a catastrophe. Deputy Craig reviewed both sets of paperwork with the enthusiasm of someone tackling advanced calculus, while real estate law likely wasn't. Covered on day one of police training, even he could discern the difference between authentic county records and Lorraine's Microsoft Word creations. Ma'am, he finally said to Lorraine, whose face had transitioned through every shade of fury. These individuals hold a clear legal title. They are permitted to secure their property in any way they see fit. Lorraine's expression transformed into something I can only describe as a cross between a nuclear meltdown and a wounded rhinoceros. This community has standards, she shrieked, gathering her counterfeit documents like a magician whose illusion had just backfired. You people, obviously, have no concept of what civilized living entails. She stomped off, with Tyler trailing behind her, but not before giving us a look that guaranteed this was merely the first act of a very unpleasant drama. Here is where Lorraine made her first significant tactical blunder. Diana had been recording the entire exchange on her phone, perfectly positioned to capture both Lorraine's attempt at property damage and Deputy Craig's validation of our ownership. After their departure, Diana filed harassment complaints with the sheriff's department and uncovered a particularly juicy detail. Deputy Craig was Lorraine's nephew. Talk about a conflict of interest, but the true bombshell arrived that evening when Mrs. Kowalski came over during our barbecue. She is in her 70s, with anxious eyes and hands that tremble when she speaks. "You folks need to be careful," she whispered, repeatedly looking back towards her own house. "Lorraine has already driven off 3 families. The Hendersons gave her $2,000 just to make her stop." The taste of my grilled burger suddenly turned to ash in my mouth. We had purchased a slice of paradise and inadvertently started a war with the local mafia don. Lorraine's subsequent tactic was taken directly from a psychopath's playbook. If you are unable to defeat someone head-on, sever their essential services and watch them wither. On Monday morning, our electricity went out. It wasn't due to a storm or a mechanical issue, but a deliberate disconnection prompted by a concerned citizen who called the electric company to report an unauthorized connection stealing power from community lines. Tuesday, the water district arrived, equipped with clipboards and looks of suspicion, to investigate claims of illegal well use that supposedly contravened county groundwater regulations. Wednesday's special visitor was the health department, armed with soil testing probes and a poor attitude, because our septic system was allegedly posing an imminent public health threat that demanded immediate inspection and possible condemnation. Each of these visits cost us time, money, and a piece of our sanity, all while Lorraine observed from her deck. Across the lake with binoculars, like a twisted bird watcher documenting her prey, Diana began to piece things together with the systematic rage of someone who had once exposed a CEO for embezzling pension funds using fake vendor invoices. She retrieved county records from the past 3 years and found that Lorraine had been using bureaucracy as her personal militia. The Hendersons had faced 6 months of utility-related harassment before finally paying Lorraine's compliance fees to end the ordeal. The elderly Petroskis were without power for 3 days during a 90-degree heat wave because Lorraine had persuaded the electric company that their medical equipment was overloading the community's grid. But this is the detail that truly made my blood run cold. The Johnsons, a lovely retired couple who had saved for 40 years to buy their lake house, ended up fleeing like refugees from a war zone, selling their dream home for a $30,000 loss rather than continue to endure Lorraine's tyrannical rule. The strategy was unmistakably clear. Systematic harassment aimed at crushing people's resolve and draining their finances. On Thursday morning, I was at Henderson's Hardware purchasing PVC fittings when Jim, Lorraine's live-in boyfriend and apparent muscle, appeared next to me like an unwelcome rash. "You know," Jim remarked, studying paint cans with the focus of someone planning a masterpiece, "your wife is making everyone here very uncomfortable." The familiar scent of sawdust and WD-40 filled the store as other shoppers suddenly found the nearby product displays fascinating. There's nothing like a small town feud to make a shopping trip uncomfortable. Marcus, right? Look, nobody here is looking for trouble. Lorraine is just trying to uphold community standards. You city folks come in here thinking you can just disregard the established way of doing things. But life on the lake has its own set of rules. I put down my pipe fittings and gave Jim my undivided attention. He was around 50, with a soft midsection and hands that looked like they had never handled anything more rugged than a TV remote. "Community standards?" I repeated deliberately. "You mean like making false utility reports and harassing senior citizens?" Jim's smile became menacing. "Sometimes, protecting property values means having tough conversations. Investments have to be protected, you see." The store's owner, Pete Martinez, suddenly feigned interest in the bolt display nearby, moving closer to our conversation. He was a smart man, and he was about to hear something significant. "Here's what I see," I declared, loudly enough for Pete and half the store to hear. "Your girlfriend is operating a protection racket, and I have the documents to prove every last bit of it." Jim's facade completely crumbled. "Accidents can happen around the lake," Marcus. Docks can collapse unexpectedly. Boats sometimes spring mysterious leaks, septic systems can back up into a person's kitchen. It would be a shame if you folks had to deal with those kinds of mechanical problems. And there it was, Jim had just issued direct threats in front of witnesses. When Diana taught me about constructing legal arguments during her forensic accounting career, she always said that criminals will eventually hang themselves if you provide them with enough rope. Jim had just fashioned his own noose. That evening, Diana converted our kitchen table into a command center, with spreadsheets tracking every incident of harassment, photos of Lorraine's counterfeit documents, and research on the legal requirements for forming a legitimate HOA. Because, as it turns out, my wife once assisted in prosecuting a similar scheme in her former career. Real HOAs have to navigate a series of expensive legal hurdles, Diana clarified, gesturing to her computer screen. They need articles of incorporation, filed with the Secretary of State, recorded CC and RS with the county, and registered agent filings, none of which costs less than several $1,000s. Lorraine is too frugal and too lazy for all that legitimate paperwork. But Diana's most explosive finding came from examining Lorraine's own property records. Our self-proclaimed environmental guardian had been living with a septic system in catastrophic failure for 18 months, creating the very contamination risk she consistently accused others of. She's projecting every one of her own violations onto her neighbors, Diana stated, highlighting the county citations on Lorraine's property. It's classic criminal psychology. Accuse others of your own crimes before they have a chance to accuse you. The metallic flavor of our well water suddenly made perfect, nauseating sense. Lorraine's septic catastrophe was likely contaminating the groundwater that we all depended on. It's time for us to do some community standards enforcement of our own, Diana declared, with a smile sharp enough to fillet a fish. The calls of the loons that evening sounded like war cries echoing over the lake. Over Labor Day weekend, Diana and I decided it was time to form some alliances. We had Mrs. Kowalski and the Hendersons over for a barbecue. Nothing elaborate, just burgers and the kind of discussion that arises when good people decide they are no longer going to be afraid. You know the most ridiculous part? Henderson remarked, sipping his second beer as he watched the sunset turn the lake to gold. We've been paying Lorraine's counterfeit dues for 2 years. That's $750 wasted because we were too afraid to stand up to her. Mrs. Kowalski nodded, her weathered hands clutching a coffee mug despite the mild evening. She threatened to report my late husband's workshop as a hazardous building if I didn't pay. I've been giving her $50 every month just to protect his memory. The aroma of charcoal and grilling meat blended with something new. The pleasant scent of solidarity beginning to form. We were creating something here, something Lorraine couldn't forge, intimidate, or threaten into submission. I had obtained the correct fire permits for our evening bonfire because, unlike certain individuals, I adhere to actual laws. The flames crackled and leaped as we exchanged our battle stories and formulated our counter-strategy. Around 9:00 p.m., Lorraine appeared like a villain from a horror film, accompanied by Tyler and her sister, Brenda, a woman who looked as though she consumed children for breakfast and used their bones for toothpicks. This gathering is in violation of community noise regulations, Lorraine declared, waving yet another fraudulent document, and that fire poses a clear and immediate threat to the surrounding properties. Tyler began taking pictures of our entirely legal bonfire, while Brenda scribbled notes as if she were compiling evidence for a war crimes tribunal. The entire act would have been hilarious if it weren't so pathologically obsessive. Ma'am, we have the proper permits? Diana stated calmly, pulling the county fire permit from her back pocket. Would you care to inspect them? Lorraine's face went through several shades of indignant purple before she withdrew with her accomplices, muttering threats about escalated enforcement actions. That should have been the end of the matter. It should have been at 2:00 m. Diana woke me up. Marcus, I can smell smoke. I sat up instantly, fully awake, with the kind of alertness you develop after 30 years in electrical work has taught you that smoke signifies danger. Through our bedroom window, I could see orange flames dancing about 30 yards from our dock, eagerly consuming the dry brush between our land and the lake. The sharp smell of burning plants was mixed with something else, something chemical and unnatural that made my throat tighten. Gasoline? Someone had intentionally used gasoline to set this fire. Diana was already on the phone with 911 as I grabbed our garden hose and began drenching everything in sight, The fire was spreading rapidly, far too quickly for a natural brush fire. Reaching for our dock like grasping hands, the fire department arrived in 8 minutes. Small-town emergency response is quite effective when your life isn't flashing before you. Fire Marshal Rodriguez assessed the burn pattern and immediately started asking the kinds of questions that make arsonists uneasy. There was definitely an accelerant, most likely gasoline. He informed us as his crew extinguished the last of the hot spots. You can see the pour patterns here? Whoever did this wanted the fire to spread quickly and widely. Our security cameras had recorded a shadowy figure running towards Lorraine's side of the lake at approximately 1:47 a.m. The video quality wasn't perfect, but the individual's build and gait bore a striking resemblance to Tyler. More incriminating evidence came from Pete Martinez at the hardware store, who recalled Tyler purchasing a 5-gallon gas can the previous afternoon. He said it was for his mother's generator. Pete told the investigating detective. He seemed agitated, kept glancing over his shoulder. But this is where Lorraine's grand scheme backfired spectacularly. The fire united our neighbors in a way nothing else could have. Mrs. Kowalski confessed that Lorraine had threatened to burn down her shed if she didn't agree to pay double the dues. The Hendersons disclosed that they had been extorted for a total of nearly $3,000. 3 more families came forward with their own harrowing tales. The most heart-wrenching was that of elderly Mr. Petrov, who arrived at our door the next morning with medical bills showing stress-induced cardiac events directly resulting from Lorraine's campaign of harassment. This gentle old man, a retired teacher who had devoted his life to educating children, had nearly died because some psychopath decided his mailbox was the wrong color. She informed me that the state would condemn my property if I didn't pay for structural compliance inspections. He said, his hands trembling as he held his hospital discharge papers. I gave her $400 that I couldn't afford because I was terrified of losing my home. That night, Diana set up a neighborhood WhatsApp group which quickly grew to 8 families strong. She looked up the criminal penalties for impersonating a government official, which, it turns out, can result in up to 5 years in prison when fraud is involved. More significantly, she found that organized schemes targeting multiple victims could lead to federal racketeering charges under the RICO Act, the same legislation used to prosecute organized crime syndicates. The smell of smoke lingered in our mouths for days, but beneath it was a different taste, a sweeter one. The taste of justice that was finally within our grasp. Lorraine had gone too far, burned too many bridges, and now her victims were becoming her accusers. The morning after the fire, Diana's forensic accounting expertise went into high gear. While I was occupied with insurance adjusters and assessing the fire damage, she was focused on a much bigger target. Every legitimate HOA is legally required to provide financial records to its homeowners. Diana explained, settling in front of her laptop like a sniper getting into position. In most states, it's the law. Let's take a look at Lorraine's financial records. She dispatched a certified letter, demanding complete financial statements, bank records, and audit reports for the Whispering Pines Lake Homeowners Association. It was the kind of request that makes reputable organizations pull out their files and criminal operations start to panic. Lorraine's reply arrived within 48 hours. A manila envelope filled with spreadsheets that appeared professional enough to deceive the average person. It contained detailed income statements indicating $32,000 in reserve funds, expense reports for community maintenance and professional services, and even counterfeit receipts for landscaping work that was supposedly keeping our neighborhood in pristine condition. However, Lorraine had made a critical error. She had provoked someone who had spent 15 years catching white-collar criminals by meticulously tracking their financial trails. Look at these figures, Diana said, pointing out inconsistencies with the skill of a surgeon identifying tumors. She's claiming $800 in monthly income from dues, but her records only show 6 families paying. The numbers don't add up unless different families are paying different amounts, which is a violation of every HOA regulation ever established. Diana's major breakthrough occurred when she investigated Lorraine's business banking records through public filings. The Whispering Pines HOA account held a mere $847. Not the $32,000 in reserves that her falsified statements claimed. Even more revealing, the bank records showed a consistent pattern of personal withdrawals. Car payments, credit card bills, and even grocery trips to Walmart. This was classic embezzlement behavior that Diana had encountered numerous times during her corporate investigations. She's been operating a check cashing scheme, Diana explained, laying out bank statements across our kitchen table like a poker player showing a winning hand. She collects real money from intimidated neighbors, then uses it for her personal expenses while fabricating reserves to justify future shakedowns. But the most damning discovery came when Diana contacted the state Consumer Protection Agency and searched for Lorraine's name in their fraud database. Our self-proclaimed community standards coordinator had a prior conviction for running an identical scam in Jefferson County in 2018. A fake property management company, forged documents, and vulnerable elderly victims. She's a repeat offender, Diana declared, printing out court records that served as a blueprint for Lorraine's current operation. It was the same fraudulent authority complex, the same targeting of retirees, and the same pattern of escalating harassment against those who resisted. Next, my wife's insurance industry background came into play. She contacted our homeowner's policy company and found out we had been paying inflated premiums based on Lorraine's false assertions about HOA requirements and community risk assessments. Our agent confirmed that no legitimate HOA existed in our area, which meant we had been overcharged by nearly $400 a year. This opens up an entirely new legal front, Diana said, her voice taking on that specific tone she uses when she's about to dismantle someone's entire world. Insurance fraud comes with federal penalties, and there's mail fraud for using the Postal Service to distribute fake notices. If we can demonstrate that she targeted individuals based on their age or perceived financial situation, we could be looking at civil rights violations. The balance of power had completely shifted. What had begun as a defense of our property had transformed into the construction of a criminal case against an organized fraud operation. That evening, Diana called for an emergency meeting at our cabin. 10 families attended, more than had ever convened in one place since Lorraine began her tyrannical reign. The full extent of the damage became evident. Over $15,000 in counterfeit dues had been collected. Thousands more had been spent on unnecessary expenses, and immeasurable psychological harm had been inflicted on decent people who simply wanted to enjoy their retirement. We are no longer victims, Diana announced to the living room full of neighbors who had rediscovered their courage. We are prosecutors, building a case that will send this woman to prison, where she belongs. Diana turned our cabin's basement into what resembled an FBI task force command center. The walls were covered with charts that tracked every fraudulent transaction, incident of harassment, and forged document. Red string connected photographs to witness statements, making it look like we were hunting a serial killer, which, in an emotional sense, wasn't far off. We need a real lawyer, Diana declared, navigating to the State Bar Association's website, someone who is knowledgeable in both criminal fraud and civil rights violations. This led us to Sarah Chun, a real estate attorney who had a particular interest in dismantling consumer scams. When Diana laid out our situation during the initial meeting, Sarah's eyes sparkled like it was Christmas morning. "This is a case prosecutors dream of," Sarah commented, looking over Diana's evidence files. "It has a clear pattern of fraud, multiple victims, documented threats, and even arson. My partner, Jake, specializes in criminal law. This is precisely the kind of precedent setting case that can define a career." The legal approach was elegantly straightforward. A three-pronged attack. First, a criminal referral to the district attorney for charges of fraud and extortion. Second, a federal complaint for mail fraud, since Lorraine had used the Postal Service to send her fake notices. And third, a civil RICO lawsuit for organized criminal activity directed at our neighborhood. During our strategy session, Sarah explained how the racketeer influenced and corrupt organizations act functions. Originally created to prosecute mobsters, RICO now applies to any ongoing criminal enterprise that impacts interstate commerce, which encompasses fraud schemes that target individuals with out-of-state bank accounts or retirement funds. When criminals engage in systematic harassment for financial gain, federal courts treat them just like organized crime families, Sarah stated, spreading law books across her conference table. The penalties are the same, the asset forfeiture rules are the same, and judges have no sympathy for them. In the meantime, I was absorbing property law at a rate faster than a paralegal studying for the bar exam. It turns out that fake HOAs are in violation of approximately 17 different state and federal regulations, starting with fraudulent business filings and escalating to the criminal impersonation of government authority. Diana organized our network of allies with military-like precision. Mrs. Kowalski provided 2 years' worth of fake violation notices, each one more absurd than the last. The Henderson's supplied bank statements that showed a pattern of extortion payments. Mr. Petrov contributed his medical records, which documented how the harassment had precipitated his cardiac events. Pete Martinez from the hardware store became our key witness, offering detailed testimony about Jim's direct threats and Tyler's questionable gasoline purchase. Even Deputy Craig, Lorraine's own nephew, consented to testify about her efforts to manipulate police responses by making false emergency calls. The counterintelligence phase of our plan was sheer brilliance. Diana created counterfeit WhatsApp messages suggesting we were considering giving up and planted rumors about potentially selling the property to escape further harassment. She even orchestrated a fake argument with me in our driveway, complete with loud door slamming and raised voices about abandoning the fight. Lorraine swallowed the bait completely. Our security cameras recorded her celebrating on her deck with Brenda and Tyler, raising champagne glasses, which likely cost more than Mr. Petrov's entire monthly Social Security check, to what they believed was their triumph. But Diana's true masterstroke was orchestrating the sting operation. She reached out to Lorraine to arrange a compliance negotiation meeting to go over the terms of our surrender. Sarah instructed me on the precise questions to ask and how to phrase them to draw out admissions of criminal conduct. The meeting was to be recorded with professional equipment supplied by the prosecutor's office, with backup recording devices concealed around our property in case Lorraine attempted to interfere with or destroy the primary evidence. Every detail was planned to be admissible in court, and everything was designed to let Lorraine incriminate herself with her own words. The smell of fresh printer ink filled our basement as we assembled evidence binders, one for each agency and court that would soon be familiar with Lorraine's name. Diana's fingers flew across calculator keys as she quantified the damages with the same precision that had once helped convict corporate embezzlers. Our late-night strategy sessions were fueled by coffee and a sense of righteous indignation. The taste of justice grew closer with every document we filed, every witness statement we gathered, and every piece of Lorraine's criminal puzzle that we locked into place. Our neighborhood network strengthened each day. The WhatsApp group transformed into a support system and a platform for sharing intelligence. Families who had been isolated and intimidated for years suddenly found their voices again, their hope again, and the courage to resist a bully who had once seemed invincible. Jake, Sarah's criminal law partner, examined our evidence and began to look eager. "This woman is going to prison," he declared after reviewing Diana's documentation. "The only uncertainty is whether she gets 3 years or 7. But we weren't finished yet. The sting meeting was set for the following weekend, and Diana had one more surprise in store. Something that would make Lorraine's admission of guilt absolutely irrefutable and completely eliminate any possibility of her claiming innocence or ignorance. The trap was laid. The evidence was compelling. And Lorraine was about to walk directly into legal quicksand with a smile on her face and a confession on her lips. Lorraine must have sensed the legal predicament closing in on her, because her subsequent actions were driven by sheer desperation. When trapped animals become dangerous, they cease to think logically. They simply attack whatever is in their path. The pressure campaign began first. Lorraine started visiting every family that had joined our small resistance. Armed with new threats and fabricated legal documents, she informed Mrs. Kowalski that cooperating with our frivolous lawsuit would make her an accomplice to filing false police reports. She cautioned the Hendersons that their testimony could lead to perjury charges and financial responsibility for community damages. The scent of fear settled over our neighborhood like a morning mist as 3 families succumbed to the psychological duress. The Weatherbys retracted their witness statements after Tyler began parking his car outside their home for hours at a time, just sitting there like a stalker conducting surveillance. The new couple at the lake's end, the Garcias, suddenly claimed to have no memory of the harassment they had previously documented with painstaking detail. But Lorraine's most spectacular act of foolishness occurred when she attempted to bribe me directly. She appeared at our door on a Tuesday evening while Diana was out grocery shopping, holding a manila envelope and wearing a smile that would make a con artist envious. "Marcus, we need to have a talk," she said, letting herself onto our porch as if she owned it. "This entire situation has spiraled out of control." I discreetly activated the recording app Sarah had installed on my phone and then stepped outside to listen to whatever madness was about to come from Lorraine's mouth. "Look, I'm prepared to be reasonable about this," she began, patting the envelope as if it held national secrets. All of these so-called violations, all these supposed compliance problems, they can all vanish if we can just come to an agreement. She opened the envelope to show $5,000 in cash. The bills fanned out like a poker hand in Las Vegas, sitting right there on our porch table in plain sight. Think of it as a settlement, Lorraine went on, her voice lowering to what she likely intended as a conspiratorial whisper. You drop this absurd legal action, persuade your neighbors to back off, and we can all return to a peaceful life on the lake. No harm done. The recording device in my pocket was capturing every single word of this bribery attempt, but I needed her to be more precise about what she was offering to make disappear. Which violations are you referring to? I asked, feigning ignorance while my phone documented her confession. Oh, the issue with the gate color, the problems with the dock placement, all those community standards violations your wife keeps insisting are fabricated, Lorraine replied, essentially handing me her admission of guilt on a silver platter. Just between us, I've been a bit lenient with enforcement, but this lawsuit is a threat to the entire community structure we've established here. And there it was, recorded, in pristine digital quality. Lorraine admitting her violations were made up and her authority was a sham, but apparently, one confession wasn't sufficient for our wannabe crime lord. Lorraine's desperation escalated when the bribe was unsuccessful. She initiated a malicious smear campaign, using fake social media accounts to spread rumors that Diana was mentally unstable and that I had a violent criminal record. Anonymous letters began appearing in our neighbors' mailboxes, alleging that I had threatened to burn down the properties of anyone who stood against us. The psychological warfare intensified when Lorraine contacted Diana's part-time job with fabricated reports of erratic behavior and potential embezzlement. She even attempted to have our water supply cut off by using forged county documents that claimed we had failed to complete safety inspections. Tyler's acts of vandalism reached new levels of absurdity. Security cameras recorded him slashing Mrs. Kowalski's tires and spray painting "snitch" across the Hendersons' mailbox. When the Garcia's dog went missing for 24 hours, only to be discovered locked in an abandoned shed with a note that read, "Accidents can happen to families who don't stay out of other people's business." Even the most intimidated neighbors knew that Lorraine's operation had transitioned from harassment to outright terrorism. But this is where Lorraine's grand scheme exposed its own fatal weakness. Every escalating act of aggression was being recorded, documented, and incorporated into our expanding criminal case. Diana created encrypted backups of all evidence files and set up secure communication channels with our remaining allies. Each new instance of harassment simply provided the prosecutors with another felony charge to add to the list. The tipping point arrived when Lorraine learned of our intention to speak at the county commissioner's meeting. Her neighborhood informant network, likely Brenda, had alerted her to Diana's plan to present our evidence during the public comment session. Lorraine attempted to secure an emergency restraining order based on entirely fabricated threats, asserting that I had made statements about burning down her house and teaching her a permanent lesson. The petition was like a poorly written piece of fiction by someone suffering from severe paranoid delusions. Judge Henderson, who was no relation to our neighbors, took a mere 12 minutes to review Lorraine's evidence and dismissed the petition with prejudice. It turns out that fake police reports and forged witness statements are not persuasive to family court judges, especially when the defendant arrives with actual evidence that refutes every single claim. That restraining order dismissal was Lorraine's ultimate tactical misstep. She was now officially on record for filing false documents with the court system, which added perjury and abuse of process charges to her mounting legal troubles. The trap was tightening, and her desperation was making her reckless. Lorraine's final stand commenced with what can only be characterized as a complete psychological breakdown masquerading as strategic warfare. Upon learning of Diana's intention to publicly expose her at the county commissioner's meeting, something within that woman's mind seemed to snap like an overstressed guitar string. Initially, she attempted to gather support from outside our immediate neighborhood. Posts began to appear on local Facebook groups, asserting that our lake community was being overrun by aggressive newcomers who were threatening property values and public safety. She portrayed herself as a dedicated citizen shielding vulnerable seniors from criminal elements with violent inclinations. The posts featured carefully selected photos of our security cameras, which were described as surveillance tools used to spy on neighbors and intimidate elderly residents. Our evening barbecues were depicted as boisterous parties that disrupted the peace and drew in undesirable crowds. Even our dock repairs were misrepresented as unpermitted construction that violated environmental laws. But Lorraine's desperation drove her to make her most significant blunder yet. She contacted County Commissioner Patricia Walsh directly, trying to use political influence to quash our public complaint. What Lorraine was unaware of was that Commissioner Walsh had been looking into HOA fraud allegations for 2 years and was thoroughly disgusted with counterfeit associations terrorizing rural areas. When Lorraine called, presenting herself as the representative of a legitimate homeowners association under siege by litigious agitators, Commissioner Walsh saw red flags larger than parade banners. Mrs. Kessler, Commissioner Walsh later recounted to me, made the error of threatening a public official. She actually said that I would regret it if I permitted those people to spread falsehoods about her community leadership. Commissioner Walsh then contacted our lawyer, Sarah Chan, who supplied her with copies of all our evidence. That single phone call transformed our presentation at the county meeting from a citizen's complaint into an official investigation backed by full prosecutorial power. In the meantime, Tyler and Jim's campaign of vandalism escalated to peak foolishness. They tried to sabotage Diana's car by loosening the lug nuts and cutting the brake lines. Criminal acts that were captured in perfect clarity by the security cameras at Pete Martinez's hardware store as they purchased the necessary tools. Detective Rodriguez apprehended Tyler at 6 a.m. the following day, discovering him in bed with bolt cutters, a tire iron, and brake fluid on his hands. Confronted with video and forensic evidence, Tyler turned on Lorraine more quickly than a pancake on a hot griddle. She told me if I didn't help her, she would throw me out and I'd be homeless. Tyler confessed, offering detailed testimony about 3 years of harassment campaigns against their neighbors. Mom said these people were trying to ruin our community and that we had to defend ourselves. Tyler's confession laid bare the full extent of Lorraine's operation, the systematic targeting of new and elderly residents, coordinated harassment campaigns intended to force property sales, and financial extortion presented as legitimate HOA enforcement. But it was the media attention that truly pushed Lorraine over the brink. Channel 7 featured our story in their Fraud Watch investigative segment, interviewing several victim families about fake HOA scams throughout the county. The reporter, Jessica Martinez, who happened to be Pete's daughter, managed to persuade Lorraine to do an on-camera interview that turned into television gold. Lorraine actually defended her behavior, asserting that she was protecting property values and upholding community standards against individuals who failed to comprehend rural life. When Jessica questioned her about the forged documents, Lorraine doubled down. Sometimes, community leadership demands that difficult choices be made, which outsiders may not understand. We have successfully maintained property values and neighborhood safety for years. The interview was broadcast that Friday evening, making Lorraine a local celebrity as the fake HOA queen. Social media erupted with shares, comments, and other victims emerging with similar stories from 3 different counties. Lorraine's last desperate move was an attempt to empty the fake HOA bank account before the authorities could freeze it. But Diana's forensic accounting expertise had foreseen this action, and she had already placed the account on a suspicious activity watch list. When Lorraine tried to withdraw the remaining balance, the bank's fraud prevention system was automatically activated. Not only was the withdrawal denied, but the attempted theft led to additional criminal charges for bank fraud and money laundering. The paper trail was damning. ATM receipts showing failed withdrawal attempts, bank security footage of Lorraine arguing with the tellers, and digital records confirming that she had tried to move the funds into personal accounts under 3 different names. Brenda, Lorraine's sister and primary accomplice, recognized the inevitable and secured immunity in exchange for her testimony. She provided prosecutors with extensive details about Lorraine's prior fraud conviction, her systematic targeting methods, and even recordings of planning sessions where Lorraine discussed teaching people lessons they won't forget. Jim, the boyfriend who had made direct threats, asserted that he believed the HOA was legitimate and was simply trying to help uphold community standards. No one bought his story, especially after Pete Martinez testified about Jim's specific threats concerning mechanical failures and accidents. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Detective Rodriguez found that Lorraine had been using a counterfeit county employee ID to intimidate residents and establish credibility with utility companies. Impersonating a government official carries federal penalties that make bank fraud seem like a minor infraction. By the time of our county commissioners' meeting, Lorraine was facing 17 felony charges across 3 jurisdictions. Her reign of terror was concluding not with a dramatic explosion, but with the quiet click of handcuffs. The county commission meeting room had not been this packed since the casino referendum in 2019. Every seat was taken, people lined the walls, and the Channel 7 news team was setting up their cameras as if they were covering a presidential event. The atmosphere was charged with a tension so palpable you could slice it with a knife. Diana was seated next to me in the front row, her evidence binders arranged like a bulwark of justice on the table in front of us. She had rehearsed her presentation for days, meticulously timing each slide, each disclosure, and each damning piece of evidence that would finally bring Lorraine's criminal enterprise into the open. Lorraine made a fashionably late entrance with her few remaining allies. Tyler, who looked as if he would rather be anywhere else in the world. Brenda, who was chain-smoking in the parking lot until the very last moment. And 3 neighbors who, for some reason, still clung to her fantasy about safeguarding property values. Commissioner Walsh brought the meeting to order, and you could sense the collective breath being held by some 40 people who were waiting for justice to finally make an appearance. We have a citizen complaint concerning fraudulent homeowners association activities in the Whispering Pines Lake vicinity, Commissioner Walsh declared. Mrs. Diana Patterson will now present her findings. Diana rose with the self-assurance of someone who had spent years testifying against corporate felons, connected her laptop to the projector, and gave the performance of a lifetime. For 3 years, Lorraine Kessler has run a counterfeit homeowners association, amassing over $15,000 in fraudulent dues while systematically harassing families with fabricated violations and an invented authority. Slide 1 showed Lorraine's fake incorporation papers alongside legitimate HOA filings, highlighting the absent state registrations and forged signatures. Slide 2 displayed bank records revealing the $847 in actual funds compared to the $32,000 in fictitious reserves Lorraine had claimed. Slide 3 presented medical records from Mr. Petrov, which documented cardiac events precipitated by the harassment, and insurance claims from families who had been charged inflated premiums based on false HOA requirements. The room was utterly silent, save for the frantic scribbling of reporters and the soft clicks of camera shutters capturing Lorraine's face as it transitioned through various shades of alarm. But Diana reserved the most explosive evidence for last. Finally, I will present audio evidence of Mrs. Kessler confessing to fabricating violations and offering a bribe to halt legal proceedings. The recording echoed through the room's speaker system with perfect clarity. Lorraine's voice could be heard explaining how she had been flexible with enforcement and offering $5,000 to make alleged violations vanish. You could have heard a pin drop. Then the murmuring began, escalating to audible gasps as Lorraine's recorded voice admitted the violations were fake and her authority was a sham. At that point, Lorraine completely lost her composure. She shot up from her seat in the gallery, her face flushed with rage, and pointed at Diana like a deranged prosecutor. This is all lies and deceit. These people are criminals attempting to undermine our community standards. I have devoted years of my life to protecting property values while they sow chaos and disrespect. Security personnel started to move towards her, but Lorraine was not finished with her tirade. I built something wonderful here, a community with standards, with order, with a respect for tradition. These outsiders want to transform our lake into some kind of anarchic wasteland where anything goes. Tyler attempted to calm her, grabbing her arm and whispering urgently, but she forcefully pushed him away. Don't you touch me. You're all conspiring against me. The county, the police, even my own family. But I know what I have done for this community, and history will recognize my efforts. Commissioner Walsh struck her gavel. Ma'am, you must sit down at once, or security will remove you from the building. But Lorraine was now beyond reasoning. You have no power over me. I serve a higher purpose: community preservation and the protection of property values. These people are nothing more than troublemakers and litigious parasites. Security did not wait for another outburst. They flanked Lorraine and escorted her towards the exit as she continued to rave about community standards and outside agitators who failed to comprehend the proper protocols of lake living. The entire spectacle was being broadcast live on the county's YouTube channel and recorded by every news crew in the vicinity. Lorraine's public breakdown served as her final, most incriminating confession. Commissioner Walsh called for order and delivered the announcement we had been waiting years to hear. Based on the evidence presented this evening, I am instructing the county attorney to press criminal charges against Mrs. Kessler for fraud, extortion, and the filing of false documents. The sheriff's department will be executing arrest warrants immediately. She went on. Furthermore, the county will create a fraud reporting hotline and collaborate with state legislators to increase the penalties for fraudulent HOA schemes. No family should have to endure what these victims have gone through. The room erupted into applause. Mrs. Kowalski was in tears. The Hendersons embraced each other. Mr. Petrov raised his fist in a gesture of quiet triumph. Outside the courthouse, Channel 7's Jessica Martinez interviewed Diana while I stood with immense pride next to my brilliant wife. What advice would you give to other families who are experiencing similar harassment? Jessica inquired. Diana's answer became the soundbite that triggered 1,000 fraud investigations. Document everything, report it immediately, and never allow bullies to rob you of your peace. Justice delayed is not justice denied. It is justice in the process of gathering evidence. 6 months later, Lorraine stood before Judge Martinez in an orange jumpsuit, looking like a deflated balloon that had finally lost all its air. She pleaded guilty to 17 felony counts, including fraud, extortion, arson, conspiracy, and impersonating a government authority, thereby avoiding a trial that would have likely extended her sentence into double digits. She received 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation and an order to pay $15,000 in restitution to the victim. Families, the judge's words are still etched in my memory. Mrs. Kessler, you terrorized an entire community for your personal benefit. Your actions constitute a betrayal of fundamental human decency that this court will not tolerate. Tyler received 18 months of probation and 300 hours of community service, which specifically involved maintaining the very properties his mother had targeted for harassment. Poetic justice in its purest form, Jim vanished entirely after the arrests, leaving behind unpaid rent and a forwarding address that led to an empty lot in Nevada. Some people have survival instincts. Others have gyms. The financial recovery was beyond our most optimistic expectations. Our insurance company refunded over $8,000 in inflated premiums once they verified that no legitimate HOA existed in our area. The settlement from the civil lawsuit provided further compensation for emotional distress, property repairs, and legal costs. But the true healing process began with what we created in the aftermath. Our monthly lakeside gatherings transformed into a genuine community tradition. Mrs. Kowalski now hosts weekly coffee mornings where neighbors share everything from local news to gardening advice. I began organizing volunteer dock repair days, which have since evolved into full-scale neighborhood improvement festivals. The social change has been extraordinary. Families that had been isolated by fear and intimidation now have their voices back, their friendships back, and the joy of a real community, free from manufactured drama and arbitrary rules. Diana found a new passion in consumer protection advocacy, now speaking at real estate conferences on how to identify and report HOA fraud. She has been instrumental in exposing counterfeit associations in 4 other counties, working with prosecutors to build cases that put scammers behind bars where they belong. I started a YouTube channel called Lake Life DIY, where I teach people how to manage home improvement projects and property maintenance without being taken advantage of by predatory contractors or fraudulent authorities. It turns out that 30 years as an electrician provided me with plenty of material for helping others avoid getting shocked. Both literally and figuratively, our marriage only grew stronger through this entire experience. Nothing strengthens a bond quite like fighting side by side against true malevolence and emerging victorious through teamwork, persistence, and Diana's alarmingly effective investigative abilities. The positive consequences continue to ripple outward. County legislators enacted the Fake HOA Prevention Act, inspired by our case, which establishes criminal penalties for impersonating homeowners associations and mandates verification systems to safeguard vulnerable residents. The local law school now uses our evidence files in its consumer protection curriculum, teaching future lawyers how to recognize and prosecute organized fraud schemes. Professor Chun, who happens to be Sarah's sister, says our case is a perfect illustration of how meticulous documentation and community organizing can overcome systematic harassment. But our most cherished accomplishment is the Whispering Pines Justice Fund. a scholarship program designed to help families across the state combat HOA fraud and property harassment. We raise funds through our annual Lake Festival, a celebration that draws hundreds of people together for food, music, and workshops on property rights and fraud prevention. The community garden we established on the site where Lorraine's fake HOA office once stood now yields vegetables that are donated to the local food bank. Every tomato and cucumber grown there symbolizes a victory over fear, a testament to the fact that good people can cultivate beauty in places where bullies once sowed ugliness. Of course, some remnants of the past remain. New buyers in the neighborhood receive full disclosure about its history, and Lorraine's house sits vacant with a weathered for sale sign that no one seems eager to replace. Reminders that evil can leave scars even after justice has been served, but those shadows only make the light seem more brilliant. Every tranquil morning on our dock, every friendly greeting from neighbors who are no longer living in fear, every sunset that is not marred by harassment or intimidation. These moments are all the more precious because we fought for them and we won. The lake still beckons at sunrise, with loons singing across water that now reflects endless possibility instead of dread. We earned this peace through courage, community, and the unwavering resolve to never let bullies triumph. Share your own HOA nightmare stories in the comments. Whether you're watching from your dream home or a small apartment, we want to hear how you stood up to petty despots. Be sure to subscribe, because next week I'll be sharing the incredible story of my neighbor who tried to literally steal my driveway, and I mean literally steal it, with construction machinery. Thanks for joining us on End for HOA, where the HOA Karens finally meet their match. If this story made you cheer or cringe, please like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and hit subscribe so you'll be ready for the next outrageous HOA story.